China plays center stage in President Biden's Asia trip. He's not going to visit the communist country, but when he lands in both Japan and South Korea, they, along with our other Pacific allies, are going to look for renewed promises of U.S. protection from Beijing. New evidence, though, shows we do a miserable job of even protecting the American homeland from Chinese aggression. Numerous reports tie the California church shooter to groups run by Chinese intelligence. David Chow attended meetings of the Las Vegas Chinese for Peaceful Unification Group. They are an effective extension of Chinese intelligence, advocating for Chinese thoughts here in the United States. Chow entered a Taiwanese church this weekend and opened fire. He didn't have a chance to detonate his homemade bombs because a parishioner tackled him. He hand-carried written letters describing his anger at Taiwan. Perhaps President Biden's silence on the shooting and Chinese intelligence operations shouldn't surprise us. The Hill reports China warns of dangerous situation developing ahead of Biden Asia trip, quoting a call between Mr. Biden's national security advisor and China's top diplomat. If the U.S. side persists in playing the Taiwan card and goes further down the wrong path, it will surely put the situation in serious jeopardy. At least so far, Mr. Biden's administration appears to have heeded that warning. Joe Walsh here, former congressman, host of White Flag with Joe Walsh. Why the kid gloves by the Biden administration, you think?
Hey, Leland, first off, thank you for talking about this. Think about it. Almost a week ago, we had 2 acts of domestic terrorism in this country. Biden rightly spoke about what happened in Buffalo, but not a word about, as you laid out, what appears to be a pretty strong case for an act of domestic terror here. Why the kid gloves? Biden is doing what any other American president would do. And that is treating China way too carefully and way too passively. And I think eventually the time's going to come, Leland, where an American president is going to have to be more aggressive with China.
Well, and you have to hope that it's not too late before it happens. The Confucius Institutes around the United States, Chinese government-sponsored organizations, U.S. education facilities, platforms for advancing pro-CCP ideas with a military agenda. There are 34 in the United States: Stanford, Emory, UC Santa Barbara. Among them, I still can't get over, though, that this was the president who was supposed to be the adult in the room when it came to foreign policy. I know you had a lot of problems with the past president. Say what you will, but he stood up to China.
Well, I don't know that Trump stood up to China. He threw out those ineffective, stupid tariffs, which hurt America. But Trump was the kind of guy who bowed down and worshipped every dictator, including China's dictator. Look, the hope, Leland, is that behind closed doors, this president is doing and saying what he needs to do. But you make a fair point. I object to his silence this week.
I don't know, though, in terms of the Chinese and U.S. actions towards Chinese under the Trump administration, the actions kind of speak pretty well for themselves, don't they, in terms of taking on Xi Jinping? I see you shaking your head here, but I covered the Trump administration. I'm trying to figure out how Trump in action was weaker on China than Biden is.
Well, I don't know that I'd say he was weaker. I'd say Biden is no different than any American president, I think, when it comes to China. All American presidents in recent years are afraid to deal with China. Look, again, what a president says is what a president does. And when an American president does what Trump did, which is sing China's praises and sing China's dictators' praises every day of his presidency, just like he did with Putin, that matters. That's part of his policy. Biden won't do that. Hopefully, Biden will engage in real politics behind closed doors.
Do we have any reason, though, to believe he's going to do anything behind closed doors that he won't say publicly?
Yes, and I give you an example right in front of us, Leland, Ukraine. Another evil dictator, Putin, invades a sovereign country. Joe Biden didn't do what Trump would have done. Well, he didn't do what Trump would have done because Trump wouldn't have supported Ukraine. But
yeah,
Joe Biden,
I gotta stop you. I gotta stop. I hate making this about the former president, but there's more dead Russians because of President Trump than any other president since Ronald Reagan up until now, President Biden. It was President Trump who killed all the Wagner mercenaries in Syria. And like it or not, Putin talked about invading Ukraine during President Trump's time, but did not do it. So, I mean, if we want to look forward, I don't want to litigate the past, but if we're going to look forward, I get the speak softly, carry a big stick. That isn't, though, the issue of Ukraine a lot more about the Ukrainians than it is about President Biden's success there?
Oh, God, no. Leland, look how unified the worldwide response to what Putin did has been. That's because of Putin. That's because of Biden. That's because of America leading. Look how unified NATO is. Look how NATO is expanding. This is the work Biden has been doing ever since Putin invaded Ukraine. And yes, I would argue Donald Trump, who wanted to, in a second term, blow up NATO or get us out of NATO, would not have done any of this.
There's two questions in terms of whether we're unified because of Putin or because, as you first said, or because of Biden, secondly. But we'll leave that for another time. I'm glad to hear you also talking about the Chinese issue. I know you do on your show as well. We'll have you back, Joe. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Leland.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.